Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to dig into complex topics and bring you the crucial knowledge really fast so you're genuinely informed without feeling buried in details. Today, we're exploring something really central to how businesses operate smoothly and, well, ethically. It's about vendor relationships and the potential for conflicts of interest. And this whole deep dive was sparked by a fantastic question one of you sent in asking, is there a company policy that addresses the receipt of gifts, discounts, and services offered by a supplier or customer? We're going to tackle that head on using some pretty comprehensive source materials to see what they suggest and look at the broader picture too. Now, before we jump in, it's really important to mention where today's insights are coming from. Please note that this deep dive is based on a script prepared by yazan.abogosh, who is a certified fraud examiner working with ethica. The original template we're drawing from is provided by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the ACFE, and that's also been reviewed by yazan.abogosh. And just so you know, the ACFE is, well, it's the world's biggest anti-fraud organization. They really set the standard globally for preventing and detecting fraud. So yeah, we're leaning on some serious best practices here today, making sure the insights are practical and solid for you.
Absolutely. And, when we look at the bigger picture, understanding all this, it isn't just about stopping fraud, although obviously that's a huge part of it. It's really about building trust. It's about integrity. It's making sure a company's resources are used for the company's benefit, right? Not for some individual's private gain. It really secures the foundation of doing business ethically.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Before we dive into policies and warning signs, what exactly do we mean by conflicts of interest when we're talking about vendors and employees? Is it mainly about money flowing out of the company, or can it work the other way too?
That's a great place to start, actually, because the source material is pretty clear on defining these situations. Essentially, a conflict of interest scheme happens when an employee's personal interests sort of bump up against the best interests of their employer. And yeah, this often leads to financial damage for the company. And yes, it definitely can go both ways. We tend to break them down into two main categories. First, you've got purchase schemes. This is where a company gets overbilled for goods or services from a vendor. But the key thing, the hidden part, is that an employee inside the company has an undisclosed stake ownership, maybe, or some other financial interest in that specific vendor.
Ah, okay. So like a manager secretly owning shares in the supplier they just hired.
Exactly. Maybe it's a facilities manager, like you said, who has a hidden stake in a painting company. That company then charges inflated prices for work done at the manager's employer. The manager pockets extra cash, but the company is the one footing the inflated bill. It's a direct hit to the organization.
Got it. And the other way?
The other side of the coin is a sales scheme. Here it's the reverse. Company goods get undersold by an employee. And again, the critical part is that the employee has a hidden interest in the company that's buying the goods on the cheap.
So selling off assets for less than they're worth.
Precisely. Imagine someone selling off old company computers. They might sell them to a side business they secretly own for way below market value. Their employer loses out on potential revenue they should have received. In both cases, purchase or sales, the decisions aren't based on what's best for the company. They're driven by personal gain.
Right. Two sides of the same problem, both hurting the company financially. That makes total sense. So, okay, if those are the kinds of schemes we need to prevent, what proactive steps, what policies and controls should companies be putting in place? What do the sources recommend?
Well, the materials outline a pretty thorough set of preventative measures. The big theme is that vigilance needs to be built into the system, not just reacting when something goes wrong. A really crucial step is data comparison.
Data comparison. How does that work?
It means organizations should regularly, periodically, compare their vendor information names, addresses, phone numbers, bank details with their employee information. You're looking for overlaps, like an employee sharing an address or phone number with a vendor. Today's tools can actually cross-reference huge amounts of data pretty efficiently to spot these hidden links. It's way beyond just looking at spreadsheets manually.
Okay, that sounds powerful. What else?
Another key point is putting vendors who employ former company employees under a bit more scrutiny.
Former employees. Why is that?
Well, the thinking is that former employees might still have insider knowledge, maybe relationships, perhaps even influence they could use to get preferential treatment for their new employer, the vendor. It creates a potential, maybe subtle conflict of interest.
Right, they know the system.
Exactly. Then, for the current employees, having a confidential reporting procedure is vital. Often, it's colleagues who notice things first, subtle stuff, maybe whispers about favored treatment for a certain vendor. They need a safe, anonymous way to report those concerns without worrying about backlash. It's like an early warning system.
Makes sense. People need to feel safe speaking up.
Absolutely. The source material also really emphasizes annual employee disclosure documents. Employees should have to fill these out every year, listing things like any outside business ownership, other sources of income, investments.
So basically forcing potential conflicts out into the open.
That's the idea. It makes it much harder to keep a hidden interest in a vendor or customer secret. It's about being proactive, declaring potential issues up front.
Okay, what about the vendors themselves?
Good point. Organizations should require vendors to sign an agreement that allows for vendor audits. And here's the really critical part for getting unbiased results.
Yeah.
Those audits must be done by someone completely independent, someone separate from purchasing, sales, billing, receiving all those departments.
Independence is key, yeah, to avoid any collusion.
Precisely. It ensures that if there are irregularities, they're actually found. And finally, just for overall clarity and accountability, all third-party relationships and any related party transactions need to be formally disclosed to management. This brings any dealings where a personal connection might exist out into the light. Management can then assess the risk and manage potential conflicts before they blow up.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a really robust multi-layered defense system.
It aims to be. It creates a structure that makes it significantly tougher for these conflicts to go unnoticed.
So what's the biggest challenge in actually making these systems work? Is it just putting them in place, or is it getting people, employees, to actually buy into it?
It's often both, really. Implementing all this takes consistent effort, resources, technology. But you're right, getting genuine employee buy-in is critical. Fostering a culture where disclosure isn't seen as, punishment, but as a normal, necessary part of doing ethical business, that's paramount. Because a lot of these measures rely on people being honest and vigilant themselves.
That totally makes sense. Culture is key. Okay, now let's circle back to your original question about gifts, discounts, services, because this is where it gets really interesting and directly relevant. Our source materials might not give us, say, a ready-made company policy template to download.
No, they don't offer a specific template document, that's true.
Right. But they do give us a very clear picture of the indicators, the specific behaviors, the circumstances, the red flags that strongly suggest a policy around gifts is needed, or maybe that an existing one is being ignored, or that a deeper conflict is brewing. So what are some of those crucial red flags companies should be watching for?
Yeah, this part of the source material shifts focus a bit from the proactive prevention stuff we just talked about to the warning signs you can actually observe.
Yeah.
And addressing your question head on, the source explicitly states a fundamental standard of conduct. It says, an employee should not accept inappropriate gifts from vendors.
Okay, so that's the principle, not the policy itself, but the core rule.
Exactly. It defines the ethical line. A formal company policy would then build on that principle, spelling out what inappropriate actually means. Setting clear limits on the value of gifts, how often they can be accepted, what types of gifts or services are okay, and which ones are definitely not. So while it's not the full policy text, the principle is laid out very clearly as a standard everyone should follow.
Got it. So beyond gifts, what other behaviors should raise alarms?
Oh, there's a whole list of other behavioral flags. For example, an employee showing an unusual, almost obsessive interest in one specific contract or contractor.
Unusual interest, like more than just doing their job properly.
Yeah, think about a procurement manager who suddenly becomes fixated on a particular, maybe obscure supplier. They're staying late, constantly advocating for them, maybe pushing back against cheaper alternatives. That level of focus can be abnormal. It could signal a hidden agenda, maybe a kickback arrangement.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Well, related to that, if an employee accepts contracts, products, or services that are clearly not favorable to the organization, that's a massive red flag.
Yeah, why agree to a bad deal?
Exactly. Unless they're getting something personally out of it, why would they accept terms that hurt the company? And here's one that often surprises people. An employee declining a promotion if that promotion doesn't involve procurement.
Declining a promotion, that sounds counterintuitive. Why turn down moving up?
It does seem strange, right? But often the reason is they want to stay put, stay close to where the potential for these conflict of interest schemes exists, like in purchasing or sales.
Yeah.
Moving up might mean moving away from their ability to run a scheme, or it might increase the risk of someone else discovering it. So they sacrifice career growth to protect their illicit income or just maintain control.
Wow. Okay, that's subtle, but makes a chilling kind of sense.
It really does. Then there's the classic.
Yeah.
A procurement employee who rarely or never takes a vacation.
Ah, yes, the no vacation sign. I've heard this is common in fraud cases. Why is that?
It's a huge indicator. It's often not just about fear of being found out while they're away, although that's part of it. Many times, these schemes are complex, fragile things that only the perpetrator truly understands how to manage day to day. If someone else had to step in, even for a week, the whole thing could unravel.
So their constant presence is actually part of keeping the scheme going.
Precisely. Their job becomes this kind of self-imposed prison because they have to be there to keep the plate spinning and prevent discovery. It must be exhausting, but it's a common pattern.
Okay, what other signs?
We also look for an employee who insists, really digs their heels in, about using specific contractors or subcontractors. Sometimes there are legitimate reasons, of course, but strong, unexplained insistence can signal a kickback or a hidden financial tie.
Right.
And obviously, if an employee has an undisclosed outside business or even just seems to be running a side hustle, that's a direct flag, especially if that business could potentially interact with the company's vendors or customers.
Yeah, that seems like a clear potential conflict.
Definitely. Then you look at transaction patterns. Like an employee approving an unusually high volume of purchases could be buying too much from a related vendor, or maybe even setting up ghost vendors. Yeah, billing for services never actually performed.
Ghost vendors, wow.
For public officials, watch out for frequent hospitality and travel expenses being paid. This can often signal bribery or attempts at undue influence. And related to that, an employee who has a remarkably high success rate in markets where competitors are known to engage in bribery. It might suggest they're playing by, shall we say, different rules to win contracts.
That's another subtle one, looking at relative success rates.
Yes. And finally, a couple of specific procurement red flags. A procurement employee accepting late bids. That undermines the fairness of the process and could mean they're giving a favored vendor an unfair advantage.
Letting them see other bids first, maybe?
Could be, or just giving them extra time. Also, if a contractor seems to have a suspiciously close relationship with a procurement employee, especially one who helped write the contract specifications, or, similarly, if contracting staff seem to be giving information or advice about contracts to one specific contractor preferentially. All these things suggest impartiality has been compromised.
That is a really comprehensive and practical list. It definitely drives home the point you made earlier. These things aren't necessarily slam dunk proof of wrongdoing on their own, right? But they are absolutely critical signals. Time to investigate further.
Exactly. They're triggers for asking more questions, for digging a little deeper.
It's all about protecting the organization's integrity, its money, and ultimately its reputation. And it shows that even without a specific gift policy template, the core principle avoiding inappropriate gifts, maintaining impartiality, it's woven through all aspects of preventing conflicts of interest. So let's bring it all together. What does this all mean for you, our listener? Whether you're managing a team, running your own business, or maybe you're just curious about how these safeguards work inside organizations.
I think the core takeaway is really clear. Understanding conflicts of interest, dealing with them effectively, it isn't just about catching the bad guys after something bad has happened. It's fundamentally about building a strong, transparent, ethical culture within the organization, right from the ground up. And that starts with having clear expectations around everything, even seemingly small things, like accepting gifts or discounts. It extends to those comprehensive disclosures of financial interest we talked about. It's the combination of those proactive measures, the data checks, the independent audits, the disclosure forms, plus keeping an eye out for those behavioral red flags we just went through. That combination is absolutely essential for a company's financial well-being, its operational integrity, and its reputation in the long run.
Absolutely. It's about making integrity the default setting, not an afterthought. And that leaves us and you with a final thought to chew on. Think about that delicate balance. On one hand, you want to foster strong, productive, genuinely collaborative relationships with your vendors and customers. That's good business. But on the other hand, you have to maintain this unwavering commitment to impartiality, to ethical conduct, to always acting in the best interest of the organization. So the question is, how can organizations encourage that genuine partnership while simultaneously safeguarding against those subtle, sometimes surprising signs of conflicting interests? It's not something you solve once and forget about. It seems like it's continuous act of vigilance, of ethical navigation, and that's really what defines a truly resilient and trustworthy organization.